We are live. First item is minutes of the last meeting on 30th of June. I'll start off with Peter, who is very kindly covering today's meeting.
Thank you, Chair. I think some of you may have noticed there's a couple of minor amendments that need doing on the minutes, but the major one was the membership was incorrect. So I do apologise to all our new members who we left off the list. I do apologise for that. And there was a slight mistake with one of the headings as well. But yeah, they'll be corrected for the Chair to sign later. Thank you.
Okay. The beauty of cut and paste, eh?
Indeed.
Absolutely. These things have happened now. I'll take it here because it seems the most appropriate place to take it. Within the minutes, there are 2 action points. The first one being something you raised, Maureen, a list of where apprenticeships are across the county, etc. I'll let Jill answer that one, if I may, please.
Thank you, Chair. We haven't circulated the list as yet, only because it's got some personal information, but broadly, the 59 external placements we have, 20 are in Rushcliffe, 6 are in Broxtowe, 4 in Bassett Law, 6 in Newark and Sherwood, 4 in Mansfield, 14 in Ashfield and 7 in Gedling. And they cover things as broad as electricians, marketing, digital, manufacturing, care, nurseries and pharmaceuticals. But we'll give you the list of the companies so that you've got that information.
Happy with that? Errol?
All I was going to ask is about the Gedling bit. Gedling is quite low, and I was wondering whether or not there is anything going on to increase the numbers. I know the other places, there's one other place low as well, but anything going on?
As we explained last time, Councillor Henry, I don't think you were able to attend. We can only use the bits of the levy that we haven't used ourselves, so there's a limit, but it is something that we're going to do some further work on to promote, and that's part of the review of the apprenticeship strategy that Councillor Wheeler's commissioned.
As you know, Errol, right at the bottom actually says the apprenticeship strategy is being reviewed and it's on the work item for November anyway. Okay, thanks, Errol. No. Please raise it. It's important you ask the question. That's what we're here for. Okay, thank you. In that case, I'll sign off eventually later on the revised minutes. Thank you, Peter. Agenda item 4. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. I've jumped as usual. I told you I'd get told off. Please, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just say Councillor Barnfather is replacing Councillor Eddy for this meeting only. Thank you.
Sorry, Chris, how could I forget you? Thank you, Peter. And declarations of interest. I better ask a question this time. Do any members or officers present have any disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? I'll read both together. Do any members or officers present have any private interest, pecuniary or non-pecuniary, to declare? I think you take that as a no. Thank you. I'll start again now. Go to item 4. I'm going to introduce the report formally and move the recommendations on page 13. Second?
Second, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. In that case, I shall hand it over to the officers.
Thank you, Chair. The first report from me today is the annual report on workforce profile information. The purpose of the report is to bring to Personnel Committee updated annual summary of the diversity profile of the directly employed workforce of the County Council and to seek approval to publish this information on the public website as required by the Equality Act, Public Sector Duty of the Equality Act. The report gives the background of what is included in workforce profile information and also where the duty comes from. What I would say is this year we have got a significantly pared down workforce profile report for a number of different reasons, primarily the impact of COVID and the focus of work has not been progressing the entire equalities agenda, although significant work has happened to do that, but it has primarily been focused on keeping people safe, particularly in areas where there have been additional vulnerabilities. Another reason for this is that the comparative data that we would normally get from census information, you will recall there was a census earlier this year, so we've been previously relying on the 2011 census data, which you'll recognise has been out of date now. We know we will get access to census information from Christmas onwards, which will make our next year's report significantly more rich in terms of comparative data. Members will recall that the protected characteristics include age, gender, race and ethnicity, disability, religion or belief, and sexual orientation. As I've mentioned, the focus has been throughout the COVID pandemic on trying to keep people safe, but actually that's meant we've had closer engagement with trade unions and the self-managed groups throughout this period because of the impact COVID has had on various sections of our population and communities. The other reason is that the emerging council plan, which will go to full council in November, will require an associated people strategy to accompany that, and it makes sense to review the equality objectives at the same time as the people strategy is emerging to ensure that equality is run through all that the work that we do with our workforce. Members will also recognise that the information that we draw on for this report for our own workforce is from the BMS system, and whilst we can draw data that is compulsory given in terms of age and gender, other protected characteristics are left to individuals to self-declare. And we continue to do work with managers as part of induction with self-managed groups to encourage people to share that information, because you will note from some of the information in the actual profile report, there's a lot of people not sharing that data with us. And we've got to try and get people to trust us sufficiently with that sensitive information that it will be used to improve the situation for all our workforce. But that is not a situation unique to Nottinghamshire County Council. We used to call it declaration. Our work with the Business Disability Forum has encouraged us to use the sharing term rather than disclosure term as another way of encouraging people. It's a more positive way of expressing it. We know we've got work to do on gathering information in terms of recruitment. We work very closely with people in Sarah's area in the recruitment team. What we want to understand is where people are applying, at what stage do they drop out. So if we can attract candidates from all sections of the community, do they fall out at shortlisting? Do they fall out at appointment or interview stage? And is it that there is something that we can do in our recruitment practices that would improve the situation, always with the underpinning principle, all our appointments are made on merit. So whilst we can level the playing field in terms of accessing our opportunities, we will always appoint on merit. We know that there are a number of other areas identified for action, and a later report in today's committee will reflect on the generic equalities action plan. There are other factors that may impact on the diversity profile of the workforce. On top of COVID, there is the opportunity for flexible and hybrid working that makes us more attractive for parents to come and work here because they can manage their lives and their childcare around work. Also caring responsibilities that hybrid working opportunities give additional opportunities, and we want to continue to explore those as the hybrid working model emerges. We have got a commitment to continuous improvement. We know that we've got to set out strategic workforce planning priorities. You may have heard yesterday in the national news that for the first time its record started, there's over 1 million vacancies. We are competing in a very difficult and challenging market. So the race for talent is crucial to ensuring we get people with the right skills and right experience and knowledge to fill the roles that we have. And that will be a bit of a recurring theme through a number of the reports that are presented here today, because we know we're not unique here. We talk to our agency managed service provider. They've got a report out that's called The War for Talent, because they've never experienced a situation in the labour market like they're currently experiencing. And the difference between the contingent market and the permanent market the gap seems to have narrowed, so it's challenging whether it's looking for permanent employees or temporary employees, which is a bit of a switch. We don't normally see that. So we're talking to external partners, we're talking to trade unions, we're talking to other local authorities to understand what their current challenges are in terms of recruitment. And then we've got to come up with our workforce plan to ensure that we're best placed to secure the very best people for the roles that we advertise. So some of that is a bit of a departure, but it explains the reason why the workforce profile report is important, and hopefully explains why this year we have pared down the information significantly. That's not to say we haven't got the data, we haven't got the information, we absolutely do, but for the sake of what we're required to publish, it was felt this was more meaningful on this occasion. And I'll pause there to take any questions.
Thank you. Before I open up to the floor, firstly, my profuse apologies. Where's she gone to? Come back, Marge, it's all forgiven. She's somewhere on there. There she is. Marge, that beaming, smiling face that you're looking at there. Marge can't be with us today, you probably gathered, but she's here virtually. I'm not going to go into the reason. That's for Marge to explain to you if she wants to. But a warm welcome to you, Marge. My apologies for missing you out earlier on. And secondly, there's an awful lot on the agenda today, so if you wouldn't mind, where possible, to keep it reasonably brief, because we've got to get through a lot of stuff here, and we've got another meeting at 4 o'clock. So, but that's not in any way striking debate. Please don't think that. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Please don't. Because if we have to come back to you outside the meeting, Jill and I have spoken about this, we will. Very simple, because we will do that. Okay, just briefly before I open it up, Jill and I have had several conversations about this, and Jill's touched upon this. Getting the best people to come and work for us is very, very challenging. So what we are doing, obviously, we still try to get the best people to work for us. And the comms team at the back there will know this. We're working with our present graduates, and we're working equally hard with our new intake in a few weeks' time. The new intake begins. But these are our staff of the future. We're putting a lot of work into it, and the comms team, together with the present group of graduates, working very hard to actually put together a blog and a few other bits and pieces to go out to the existing graduates and new graduates so they can talk to each other. That's very important. They understand what we are, why we're here, what we do, and we want member involvement with our graduates going forward as well. That's very important. We want them to feel valued, and every single member, elected member of this council, will have a part to play in that. I'll stop there. Do you want anything to add, Marge, at this stage? Don't tell her that.
No.
Okay, thank you, Marge. I'll throw it open in that case. Errol.
Thanks. You took away my questions.
Sorry,
comments.
Apologies, Errol.
But it is clear that the data has reflected on the impact that this pandemic has had on the workforce, because, for example, things like 8% turnover you've got here, which is quite worrying, because it is important that we have the ability as a workforce to have a turnover, quite good turnover. I know you talked about the graduate, but I want to know, is there any work ongoing in where we're going to get them from? Because, from the data and the things we've just talked about, I'm not sure how we're going to get these.
That's an extremely good question. I know Jill has an answer for you.
Yeah, I'm sure she will.
Yeah. Thank you.
We're going to look for them everywhere, frankly, and whilst graduates are an incredibly important part of it, we know we need to attract people to work in every part of our workforce, because not everyone is a high flyer, but that doesn't mean to say everyone doesn't want to have sustainable employment. So one of the key strands of the work that Councillor Wheeler has commissioned, the primary objective is how we can create sustainable employment opportunities for younger people primarily, but across the whole workforce. So we're going to develop our relationships further with schools and academies. We're going to develop it with the local FE colleges. We work already with the local universities, but we're going to do more work, because what we want is every young person who's doing their whatever qualification, be they T-levels, be they GCSEs, A-levels, degrees, if they're associated with an occupation that the County Council has opportunities for, we want them to think of us first. And we also want to have given them a flavour of work before they even get to making those decisions through a work experience programme. So we're going to develop significantly our offer in that area.
I know you have mentioned this one, but faith organisations, they play a really important role in the community, and whether or not you can tap into those as well might be useful.
One of the things we try to do is when we have opportunities, so when we're going out about the graduate recruitment, we let our self-managed groups know, so that if they have networks into churches or faith organisations, we encourage them to share the opportunities with their networks, so that we feel that we've got the widest cover.
Thank you. Maureen?
Thank you, Chairman. Jill's answered one of my queries, which was really how were we going to get out there and sell it to them prior to them sitting their A-levels, prior to them going to university, prior everything really, because I think we don't sell ourselves properly. I think we sell ourselves short in many ways, because I think there are a huge amount of people out there that want a good, solid career, as I call it, and know where they're coming from and where they're going to, and with possibilities of promotion and climbing the ladder and moving forward. Not everybody, you're quite right, is a high flyer. My big concern is, why do we have to, or is it expected through you and Marge, for everything to come back to this authority, to this committee, to get approval? Because I just think somewhere along the line, I think officers, Marge and the team, need to be in a position to be able to quite easily offer some incentives. Perhaps we should talk about incentives, and if that's the way forward, I don't want to delay something. I don't want to delay anybody coming to this authority if it means we've got to wait 6 or 8 weeks for the next personnel committee to tick the box and what have you. I'd sooner us all agree today that whatever you do, Marge and the team, interviewing, whoever's doing the interviewing and looking at employment, I think you need to have that facility to offer incentives. And how those incentives are offered is down to the senior management of this authority. And that's what I would like to see, because I think we could offer incentives that might just swing it that people want to come and work and live in Nottinghamshire.
Thank you. I'll ask Marge to come in a minute, but before I do, just referring back to what we were saying earlier on, as a comms team know, with the present group of apprentices, graduates, I met most of them in this chamber. We actually did a recording of it, which went on YouTube, and to be honest with you, they're really enjoying their time with us, getting wonderful experiences right across the piece. And the idea of the blog is, which they're going to be working with our comms team on, is not only to talk to each other, but talk to the next group and the group after, and the group after that. So we're investing a lot in that already. And that will also roll on to apprenticeships, which is a lot of work taking place on that one as well. So I hope that gives you some comfort, Maureen, on that. And I'll certainly bring Marge in there about incentives to answer your question.
Okay, thank you. I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Dobson. We're going to have to apply all the means we've got open to us, really, to attract and retain staff, because once we've got people, we want to keep, and we've developed their skills and experience, we want to keep them. I think the way to tackle the issue you're raising is to to be clear about having a strategy and an approach within which gives us the flexibility to operate, to whether it be incentivize or recruit people or whatever, as you suggest. So I think that strategy we're developing and bringing back in November will help us with that, as will our people plan that we will develop to sit underneath the council plan. That will give us the framework within which to work and enable us to make those decisions and implement things quickly.
Thank you. Also, if you remember, Maureen, when Jill did interviewing of the last group of graduates, we actually recruited more graduates than we set out to do. So we are deviating away from that, and we told you retrospectively, and it went down well anyway, because we could not afford to lose a high caliber staff candidates.
Well, with the greatest respect, it's not just about graduates, about everything
No,
and everybody.
I'm used as an example.
Yeah, fine.
Sorry, if I misunderstood. Anyone? Any other questions? No. In which case, we will move to the recommendation, which is bottom of page 3. I'm not going to read out today. We've all read it. I alluded to it earlier on. Is everyone happy to support it? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. Agenda item 5. Nottinghamshire County Council's Corporate Equality Action Plan. I formally remove the recommendations on page 24. Jonathan? Second.
I'm happy to second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Sorry, Jill, to you again.
Thank you, Chair. So as mentioned previously, there is a recurring theme running through a number of today's reports. It just happens that it makes sense to bring them to the same committee so that it builds a picture for you. So as members of this committee, long-standing members of this committee know that there have been a number of reports coming over the previous 18 months which build our equalities profile. This is the overarching Equalities Action Plan. There are other action plans that target specific areas. There's one that's there to support black employees, for example. There's one that sits with the gender pay gap. There's one that sits with disability confidence. So, but very particularly, because when reading this, it seems that it's a bit light in some areas, but that's not to say we're not doing things in other areas. This is just a generic one. And today I'm here to seek your approval, the approval of the Personnel Committee, to the attached Equalities Action Plan so that we can refresh the information that's on the Council's intranet. So this is an internal document. It's not for the external use, although we do sometimes share it with external partners to evidence what we're doing in particular areas. As I mentioned, and I'm sorry to keep going on about the pandemic, but it has been a thread through so much of what we've done over the previous 18 months, and it has created a number of its own challenges across the equalities agenda. There has been an increased risk to people who have evidenced additional vulnerabilities, including long-term health conditions, which have led to much closer and frequent meetings with both the recognised trade unions and also the staff support groups, which I think has enabled us to have much richer discussions, much more honest and open discussions about what it feels for some of those groups to work for Nottinghamshire County Council. Again, members who've been members of this committee for some time will recall agreeing to the Workforce Resilience and Recovery Strategy in November 2020. And this document set out how we would ensure that, again, we had the right people with the right skills and experience at the right time. And one of the things, and I think I have said this when we've been talking about graduates, that they've been really drawn to the council as an employer, is that ability for us to evidence that we treat people with fairness and equally. So I think it's important in terms of our attraction strategies. It's not just for our current workforce, it's also for our future workforce. The information within the action plan is fairly self-evident, I have to say, and has been helped significantly by the appointment of a dedicated equalities officer, Taraj Singh. Taraj has been in post since the middle of April. She's done an awful lot of building relationships that, so she gets to know who people are and what their roles are. She's done a lot of work in reviewing what our current offer is, both in terms of training, equalities impact assessments, the various action plans we've got. And now we're starting to generate activity about delivering on some of those things, working with the corporate equalities group, working with departmental equality groups, and working with the staff support groups and the trade unions and managers. So there's a more cohesive approach. And as I say, Taraj's appointment has given us some additional capacity to make that more meaningful in terms of the work undertaken. I mentioned very briefly in the previous presentation that the public sector equality duty requires us to have a number of publish our equalities objectives, and that's what we're starting to look at now, what those objectives will be moving forward, to sit within the action plan and the people strategy, so that we have got a line running through all those various strategies and action plans, and it's likely we'll bring those here as well for approval. Just in terms then of, there is no option to consider something else. We need to have an equalities action plan. It's important for all the reasons that I've said. But if there's anything that anybody identifies as an obvious gap, we're more than happy to consider that and include it moving forward. We will be bringing further information back to committee in January around the gender pay gap, which is an annual report. We also have we instigated a new departmental, so Chief Executive Department didn't have a departmental equality group because so many of us sat on the corporate equality group, but actually that was denying people who weren't more of the HR side of the Chief Executive Department a voice in terms of the equalities agenda. So Marie chaired the first meeting of the Chief Exec's Equalities Group at the end of August, and there is work going to be generated through that group. So, as I say, there's an awful lot of activity going on. I would hope the next time we come, there'll be significantly more actions ticked off than just been identified. But as I say, I'm very clear that's not because we've not been doing anything in terms of this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Jill. As Jill just said, we've got a new equalities officer. Well, when I say new, newish equalities officer, and I'm also the equalities champion, members equalities champion. So I've already met with our equalities officer. In fact, I've got another meeting coming up very soon, next week. So again, Jill has alluded to this. I want to understand better what the review is, and how we're going along with it, because as Jill said, we're going to come to you with the outcomes anyway. Over to you, folks. Anyone got any questions? Please, Errol.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I welcome this report, really. It's been a long-awaited report, update, sorry. And I know we haven't done a lot with it because we talked a lot about the pandemic and what's going on there. But we also need to be clear that most of the things that were identified in this report were prior to the pandemic, and there was work that was identified then. It's not the pandemic that caused it. So just thought I mentioned that. But we look forward to the next update and the work that this new equalities officer is doing with Jill and the team. See how we move forward with some of the identified actions that we need to do as an authority.
Point well made. Thank you, Errol, and noted. Thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's worth saying that, as you can see by the action plan, the amount of work that goes into quality, you see it throughout all the agendas, and I see it in my role with what Jill and Marge do on a day-to-day basis. We're not just simply ticking a box. It's generally done because, as a council, we want to make sure we are inviting everyone who wants to work for us, no matter what background, gender, anything in their lifestyle, and when you go for this report, you can see the work being done. I know they're quite often the same. So I think we really need to support that and also thank the work the officers done on it. And just to also bear in mind that you'll never be 100% perfect. There'll always be work to keep doing. There'll always be someone who may feel that to be more work to be done. And that's why we're here to review what's going on and also to make clear to any of our members of the team and staff, if they feel like there's something they want to raise, they can do it at any point with either the line manager, with the with Tarrage as the equality officer, or with obviously myself as vice chairman and with the chairman, because we keep learning this, as we know, things change on a day-to-day basis. What was right 10 years ago isn't right now, and things keep changing day-to-day basis, so we'll keep evolving. But I think you can see by everything we do, this is something really core to what we do as a council. We need to keep supporting that and to keep moving forwards. Thank you.
Thank you. As Harold's rightly pointed out, we're accountable as committee, something we will never lose sight of. Come back to you. Thank you. There's no other hands up, in which case I will now go to recommendation piece on please, on page 24. So everyone, and the votes, everyone in favour? Thank you ever so much indeed. It's carried unanimously, I think. In that case, item 6, which is Disability Confident Leader Accreditation.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I better, before I get told off, can I move the recommendation, please, on page 34? No, you're
Happy to second you being told off. Also happy to second the recommendations, Chairman.
Thank you. How nice. Please, Jill.
Thank you, Chair. Disability Confident is a national standard set by the Department of Work and Pensions. This council has been on, I hesitate to say the word journey because that's very X Factor, so apologies for that. We've been working towards Disability Confident Leader accreditation for a little while now, having gone through the 2 previous stages. To meet the standard, you've got to demonstrate not only internal leadership but community leadership. And you also have to be externally validated. We had chosen to use Leonard Cheshire as our external validator, primarily because of the work that we've done with the Change 100 interns. Unfortunately, at the very last minute, and that's why I'm saying this, because it's relevant to the recommendation in the report, they didn't want to, or they felt unable to sign the validation on the basis that although we met the majority of the criteria, they felt our evidence was light in one area. So we felt they could have told us that much earlier, but they chose not to. So we have now gathered the information that we already have. We have the evidence. It's just we hadn't presented it in a particular way. And we have now sent our submission off to our new partner, the Business Disability Forum, who have agreed they will turn around the validation very quickly. So we will be submitting to the DWP imminently. So apologies for that, because the report says that the submission has been made to the DWP, but because of that hiccup with validation, it hasn't yet gone, but it will be within the next 2 weeks. A lot of this report, by way of update, does actually mention our renewed relationship with the Business Disability Forum. Council has previously been a member. We withdrew membership a number of years ago, but having been approached and met with them on several occasions, thinking about what the future currently holds in terms of hybrid working, in terms of encouraging people who may not have accessed employment, the way people with disabilities now can work with being tech enabled, it was felt appropriate to renew our relationship with them. And I have to say that's been an incredibly positive experience. Our membership just began from the 1st of September. We've taken it on for 12 months to see how productive that will be. And as part of our annual reviewing of membership of a whole host of affiliations, that will continue to be done. The signs are very positive at the moment, I have to say. And we will be rolling out to our workforce how they can access some of the support. It is particularly relevant in terms of supporting managers and considering reasonable adjustments in terms of long-term health conditions, abilities, which we've always had the support of our occupational health service, but it was felt that external validation would be further evidence of how we want to support our employees with disabilities to join work or to remain in work where they become disabled over the course of their employment. So members have previously been very supportive of our work in this area. We've included that support as part of our submission because we think it's really important that the DWP acknowledge the commitment both politically and in terms of the work being undertaken. And as there are a number of new members to the committee, it was felt appropriate to bring this update here today. As I say, apologies for the blip in timeline. Hopefully we'll have news at next committee about how our submission has fared with the DWP.
Thank you. Thank you, Jill. Errol?
It's just a clarification for me. I'm not sure if
Please.
I got this right. Are you saying then, Jill, that the BDF is going to do the validation of this accreditation prior to it going to the
It's a requirement of the accreditation process that you have external validation from an organisation involved in supporting people with disabilities before you submit to the DWP. Sorry if that wasn't clear.
Thank you. Thank you, Errol. Thank you, Jill. Anyone else? Okay. Right, in which case, the recommendation is on page 34. If you're agreeable, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated. Happy with that? Yes. Yeah. Item 7, health and safety 6-month update. Oh, sorry, I've jumped too far ahead, have I? No, I am right. Okay. Again, I'll move the recommendation, please. Jonathan, if you'd like to second it.
Yeah, happy second, Chairman.
Okay, lovely. John, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. The aim of the report is to give you an update on health and safety activity that's taken place over the last 6 months and to ask for approval for the health and safety action plan for 21-22. The management system development, as we've previously spoken at this committee, we achieved ISO 45001 earlier on this year, following a 2-day audit. Thereafter follows a series of ongoing continuous assessment audits or continuous assessment visits, basically at 6-monthly intervals. So we had our first 6-monthly assessment audit in the 1st and 2nd of July. This actually examined how we'd progressed since our awarding meeting and when we were first awarded 45,001. The open issues were mainly administrative and regarding the management system. So one of the key changes is, whilst we know we carry out an action like setting an action plan, it's where do we demonstrate and record the process for doing that. So it's like almost having an operations manual for how we operate and manage the health and safety system. At the ongoing assessment audit in July, no major non-conformities were raised. There were a couple of items again around administration and document control. On to points 6 and 7 on the report. So we will make progress for the following audit, which will be in the 12th and 13th of January next year. So they will actually look at how we progress establishing the management system in its documented form. And some of the progress, I shan't run through each point in its entirety, but some of the progress we've made are on the 4 bullet points listed under point 7. But the aim overall is to go through the management system, housekeeping, simplification, easy to read forms, and we've taken something like, reduced from something like 120 SR documents down to something like 17 key essential forms, finding that most of them weren't used. So actually we can actually focus now on what's important. 45,003 is a standard which sits along 45,001. We've gained a general awareness of this over the last couple of months. Now, this is a new standard, but it isn't an accredited standard, and by that we don't have to go through an accreditation process. It just gives us a framework to work within. Nottingham University have played a significant part in writing the standard. I've approached the university, had a meeting with them, and looking at what joint working we can do, and for them in some way to ratify our approach. So what we hope to do, and the difference is ISO 45003 manages what's termed psychosocial risk, or the psychological aspects of safety, things like social isolation, the fear of returning to the workplace, particularly after COVID, and then other ergonomic and health-related issues. Many of the systems are already in place, so we're working very closely with HR colleagues and occupational health, and actually bringing out the work that existed pre-pandemic, and making that now fit for and aligned to 45,003. So we're thinking of the well-being tools, the well-being items on the intranet, stress counselling, and so forth. It's particularly timely as we reoccupy, and as we move on to talking about the corporate building reoccupation, but we're using this as an opportunity to examine behavioural safety, and within that, individuals' fears and aspirations of how safety should be implemented in the workplace, how well they felt we've managed health and safety. And really I can report back from the 3-point checks I'm about to speak about that that's been well received, and we've had very little negative comment. Moving on to the health and safety action plan under point 11, I've attached the action plan. I won't go through it in entirety, but we'll take questions after. It's in its traditional format. It's something that was reviewed by BSI at their July visit. They found it suitable and sufficient for the needs, and reflected the key priorities of the council. When I mentioned that process has been formalised under point 12, we need to set a framework of where the action plan is set and how we track progress. So the compliance board, which sits 4 times a year, will be the home for that, and the process will be in April. The action plan will be set and brought obviously to this committee for sign off and agreement. Progress will be tracked, but in September and April equally there will be a management review tracking the progress of the action plan. So it formalises the system, and that's the approach that 45,001 expects, so that therefore we document that process. That's what the auditors will look to ensure that we're following our own process. Corporate building reoccupation. Since really last August, we've had a presence within the corporate offices, the larger offices, the Trembridge House, County Hall, Sherwood Energy Village, Meadow House, Lawnview House, both in terms of establishing the safety measures that were needed during the height of the COVID pandemic, and latterly following the measures where the government guidance has been relaxed. So where we've actually taken down now some of the social distancing signage, but making sure they are fit for purpose. We have introduced a 3-point check, so we've got visibility of how the buildings are being used, managed, and as I previously mentioned, the views of staff actually working within the buildings and how safely, importantly, how safe they feel. So the 3-point checks really focus on, the first check is around the actual application and implementation of emergency procedures, which is something which is proven challenging when you have little people within the building to actually implement them. So those roles, the volunteer roles, are actually embedded within the workforce. The volunteer fire wardens, the volunteer evac chair operatives, the volunteer first aiders. But if they aren't in the buildings, it's hard to actually be able to provide that cover. So it's given us some food for thought, some decision making to do, some liaison with other organisations, and we've come up with an approach where we're mitigating down the risk. We're working very closely with our fire experts within ARC. Also gaining information and advice from the fire service as to how this should be managed moving forwards. So that's the first of the 3-point checks. The second one really are around the HSE's requirements. So the Health and Safety Executive still have requirements. These focus really on the infection prevention control elements of hand hygiene and cleanliness, cleaning regimes. But the one area that we as an authority have control over directly in terms of building management is that of ventilation, and the need to maintain suitable levels of ventilation. Now, clearly there will be, as we move towards winter, tensions with that, maintaining heat or a suitable working temperature, but equally with, as we see in here, windows open and adequate ventilation. So that's the second point, and it's around a pragmatic approach, ensuring the ventilation takes place, but balancing that against building usage, time and numbers of people within an office space. So we're working with facilities management, and so that it's a process of education, and this is where we start to talk about getting people to take action for themselves and the behavioural aspects. Then the third point is around the, as I've said, behavioural safety and how people feel, and we're basically questioning as we walk back and saying, well, is this the first time you've been in the office? How do you feel? Have you any anxieties around how safety is being managed? And the feedback is generally very good. One or two of the comments have just been around ergonomic use and IT equipment. Moving over the page, water safety and drowning prevention. This year, in 2021, there's been an upsurge of national incidents of drowning. It's something we recognised as an issue again pre-pandemic, and we did hold a water safety event in 2019. It's something last year we experienced more difficulties on some other sites than this year, purely because I think lockdown channeled activities. If we were to look at the home peer point, it channeled the activities of people into making their own activity, and one of the places they could go was actually onto the riverside, whereas that's lessened now given that other entertainments and activities have opened up. So it's become less of an issue this year, but it's still something we need to focus on in terms of having a strategy for drowning prevention. That said, we've risk assessed across all our sites and those operated by partners, such as the home peer point operated by Serco. We're working closely with them. There has been an upsurge in, if we turn into legal swimming within the water recreational swimming, where they're putting themselves in danger. Education sessions have been run by emergency services and supported by ourselves, and it's something we're keeping a watchful eye on across some of the other sites that we own, with the potential for illegal recreational swimming. What we're looking to do is formalise a drowning prevention policy with the partnership's assistance. So it will be a Nottinghamshire drowning prevention policy, not a Nottinghamshire County Council one. And I think that's the only true way that a policy can work, with the inputs of all agencies and services working towards that single aim. We will look again to work with those agencies and through the partnership to hold another event, so that may well be we can focus on doing something midsummer next year on site like the previous one, or using the National Water Sports Centre to facilitate that. Work with schools. We expect a lesser buyback this year, but actually it turned the other way to be an extremely strong buyback in terms of the services for schools offer. We've had a stronger buyback as we've ever had, and I think that's largely based on the support we're able to give schools over the last year, again through interpretation of the government guidance and managing COVID secure measures on site. As we move forwards now into this new term, my health and safety team have been working with schools again since the relaxation and changes to government guidance, and just ensuring that risk assessments are in place and are suitable. One of the things I would have written in this report had it been available at the time of writing three weeks ago, and this will be the focus over the next coming couple of months, is that of CO2 monitoring. So it's allied to the ventilation issues, and you may have seen in the press and in the media that schools will be issued CO2 monitors to use CO2 as a medium to identify poor air condition and poor air exchange. So we are working with schools. The first 5 monitors for Nottinghamshire schools are the special schools, and as of this Friday my team's working with St Giles to look at how a risk assessment can be effectively implemented, and then we'll be able to roll out that support from that knowledge across the broader school estate. The final points of the report really relate back to some of the activities during COVID, the PPE cell and the support we gave, both with advice on PPE, face fit testing, and then from the earlier part of this year, where we established the community lateral flow testing sites, and we had a programme of on-site safety inspections. So we worked alongside the fire service and the city council across those sites, giving confidence that they were being well managed and managed in line with the standard operating procedures. So as we move forward into October, our inspections will cease, but we'll take up a business as usual safety approach, whereas the business partner will be available to give support. So that brings me to the end of my update, and I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks ever so much, John. Jonathan, sorry. Blimey, all his hands coming up now. Jonathan, you go first. Thank you,
Chairman, and thanks, John, for the presentation. I think, first of all, as always, John, you never take credit for what's been done well. I think point 8, having achieved the accreditation ISO 45001, well, be able to pronounce it's probably an achievement, but be able to achieve it is really fantastic work, especially with the COVID pandemic. We need to just to shut off everything else and just work on that. We haven't been going forward. So I think, John, on behalf of all of us, please take that feedback to your whole team as well. Really well done for achieving that accreditation with the next one. I think health safety is always one of those subjects that a lot of people just think it all gets done well and seems quite boring, but actually how we know how critical it can be, especially for the authority. If something does go wrong, not only the financial implication, the reputational impact, and actually looking at what you're doing going forwards, recovering from COVID, I think shows we're in a good place in terms of the management we have here under your leadership. I think you've got to take a lot of credit for that. In terms of going forwards with more remote working and this hybrid working, I think what's really important is for ourselves and also for all teams to bear in mind that it's a lot more onus on our own personal health and safety, because when you're all in the office, yes, you can say it's a manager's fault to make sure I'm stuck there, but it's going to be a lot personal at home. And actually, that's why I think well, for all of us, but also that feedback to go back to managers, they need to still make sure it's happening, but also that personal impetus about it. If you're not sat in the right correct chair at home, the right posture or anything else, that's what's doing yourself. Of course, that's an impact on the authority and the sickness rates, but also the health of our staff. So I think it's not kind of just going to be sure it's not just all on you and your team. There's got to be a lot of that personal emphasis and also led by manager teams as well. So I just want to make those comments, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Jono?
Chairman, thank you very much. I really enjoyed reading this report, believe it or not. It was quite enlightening because I've not been on this committee long, so I'm constantly learning. The question I have is, obviously we are compliant in the buildings that we own and we run. What about the ones that we aren't in at the moment? Maybe we've got a fair few within walking distance from my division, like the building across the road from District Council, like Lillian Stone that we have some land there, and elsewhere where we might not have staff, but how are we making sure we are compliant on them sites?
Yes, certainly. We've been working with corporate property, so any buildings within the corporate estate we've had an overview of. We've basically split this between the corporate office, the larger corporate offices, and then the rest of the estate. But at the very early stages of the pandemic, we recognised some of the measures that needed to be taken, things like draining down water systems, ensuring Legionella management wouldn't be an issue when we come to reopen, maintaining fire systems, statutory inspections. So working closely with corporate property colleagues, yeah, I can give you the assurance that none of the buildings have been overlooked. And on top of that, as we reoccupy, a risk assessment is done, so there is a revisit, and we have the support then of through ARC on the water management team or the fire safety team, giving us the confidence that those systems then are up to the standard they should be for reoccupation.
Thank you. I've forgotten, Sheila, your next. I'll come to you in a minute, Sheila. Maureen.
First of all, can I say a personal thank you to John and the team who did me a great favour during the summer holidays. Thank you, John. You relieved a big problem, a big headache. And Jonathan's absolutely right when he says, you know, at the end of the day, everybody goes, oh, health and safety, how boring. But they don't realise just quite what's involved.
Absolutely.
And until you come and sit on this committee, you don't realise what's involved. And yes, you do think, oh, it's a bit boring, but it's not. And the amount of work that John and the team do put in under his leadership is tremendous. Water safety is my big concern, as you well know. Most of my division is down the River Trent. And an awful lot of people have taken up to cold water swimming, and I've got numerous quarries. So I hope we're keeping our eye very severely on that, because people are going in, and I know the people who own the quarries are keeping their eye on the job, but we are suddenly building up for a big flush, forgive the pun, of cold water swimming. They seem as though this is the big thing for them to do. My other concern, of course, is personal safety, not the PPE equipment, Chairman. I know what we're doing there, that's fine. We don't need the PPE, but you know through you what John and Jonathan knows, because he and I have been on this committee, and Sheila, when she was chairman of it, we've been talking about our safety, those of us who represent in the wild and in the woods, and we going out at night and coming back in the dark. And eventually, I'm hoping that John is going to say that he's got an app for me to put on my phone that will actually work in the middle of nowhere, where we don't have a mast that actually works for people's mobile phones. So I'm hoping John Nyland can answer that.
No pressure, John.
Well, it's all right saying there is an app, but if you haven't got
it's very important. Of
a
course it is.
mast.
Absolutely. And I know you raised it before, Maureen. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Dobson. Yes, there is actually good news on that front, that the rollout of the People Safe loan working system has started. There is a phone-based app, but there is also an alternative where the signal strength is low. So obviously outside of this committee meeting, we'll be able to give you more details of how and when that will be available. But the rollout has started.
And John will be able to track you everywhere now, okay? Of course. Thank you. Sheila, thank you for your patience.
Mine's open water as well, because up my way we've got plenty. People have been doing organised sessions, like you say, at different places in South Yorkshire, and they're paying to go to this open water swimming where they're all organised. Are we thinking of doing anything for around Nottinghamshire on that scale? Also, we've got leisure centres were closed when it was quite hot, so we had people going into streams, rivers, you name it. I was frightened to death, because you just think, if a kid gets in there and just falls over, what are we going to do? You know, I know parents should be responsible, but a lot of times there's no parents around.
Conversations with the police and their public safety teams to go into schools as well, and how we can get the water safety message across is something we need to look at. As for plans for supporting open water swimming, that isn't something I'm aware of or has crossed the agenda of the Water Safety Partnership.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. There's a lot of good in this report, obviously, and as Jonathan said, we've got a very good record we should be proud of. I sometimes, just as an observation, really, I sometimes think on a number of reports that we get that 66 elected members seem to be a bit separate to staff in the way that we look after staff brilliantly in HR. It's not always obviously available to elected members. I think as a general principle, we try and incorporate elected members in this, and particularly on page 81, 2.2 on lone working devices. We all are lone workers, and we often go into people's homes, visit people. We sometimes go to fairly large groups of people who might not be particularly positive towards what we're doing. I've been physically threatened. I've had death threats in actual fact. I had a colleague on a district council who was physically threatened. When I reported this to that chief executive, it turned out that the person who threatened her, and this was a lady in her 70s, had actually assaulted a planning officer and was on a watch list. And as elected members, we didn't know they had a list like this. So is there a list of people? I mean, it's a serious issue, isn't it? Is there a list of people who have been? No, resident. It really wasn't funny, trust me. So do we have a kind of list of people who have threatened or even assaulted staff? If we do, can it be made available to members? Because we do go into these situations. And equally, can this phone safe app be rolled out to elected members if they choose to use it? Because I think we do put ourselves in some.
Thank you, Richard. John.
Yes, certainly. I mean, there is a programme of rollout of the app for elected members, and I'm somewhat surprised this afternoon actually that you haven't already heard of this or the facility for this. So one of the actions I shall take away is making sure that you're fully aware of the programme and that's timetabled out. As for the list, I think the approach is one of risk assessment for meetings. So there will be various lists held by various organisations or on various systems, but depending on the meeting you're going to, we advocate a degree of risk assessment if you think it's something that's going to be contagious, and that would involve also looking at those various databases to gain information. To use an example, it may be that it's a social care meeting and it would be a matter of looking at a red flag on Mosaic prior to the meeting to help educate the risk assessment.
Are you happy with that, Richard? Jill, you were nodding while John was talking. Well, do you want to say anything?
I was just going to say, I think Marge might want to come in about the
okay.
member.
That's exactly what I was asking.
Training programme.
Hello, Marge. Welcome. You're muted.
Muted. Sorry. Once I mute, I can't get used to switching it off. One of the things I took from what Councillor Jackson said was about the need to maybe join up our HR approaches and our support for members approaches a bit more. So that's something, Councillor Jackson, obviously I've got 2 feet in both camps in that regard, in respect to the monitoring officer role and the being responsible for HR. So I'm happy to take that away and look at how we could kind of get the best of both worlds there, if that's okay. I don't think we have a list of people as such. As John says, it is a risk assessment based approach, but there's probably again something working with members that we could do to make sure that members aren't putting themselves inadvertently in risky positions like the example you gave. So I think there's some more work we could do on that, Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Marge. Thank you. Errol.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I really agree with Councillor Jackson. It's very, very important. I'm glad to hear that Marge will look at that because it's an important issue for us all. But Councillor Wheeler and Councillor Dobson gave some praises to you, John, for the magnificent work that you're doing. I don't think you recognise that, but you are doing a great job, and we thank you very much for that. In terms of the CO2 monitors, are we looking for CO2 monitors for all buildings as well, apart from schools, like here, for example, or even in the customer service centre, for example, where lots of people are working? Are we looking at that?
First of all, Councillor Henry, thank you for your positive comments. Onto the CO2 monitors. Schools will have, as I've previously mentioned, monitors rolled out. I believe there are 2 types of monitors. This will, one, give us the opportunity to actually look how effective they are at informing risk. And if it's something we foresaw the need for, then we would we'd obviously be able to purchase and use those within the buildings. The practicalities of actually using the monitors, I think there's a stage before this, and what we're looking at, and this is where we're advising schools, is basically you do a mapping exercise of the rooms, and where clearly windows like this can be opened, ventilation levels are fairly good, then that wouldn't be necessarily a priority area for monitoring. But if this was an enclosed space with no opening windows and regular meetings, it would be a priority area. So I think it's to focus our priority areas, or get a programme of where the higher risk areas are, and that's where we would use the monitors. But there is no plan at the moment to do that as a programme across the corporate buildings. But what we are doing is, as I've said, having a programme of what's basically the HSE are terming passive ventilation, in simple terms, opening windows, and ensuring that is done. There will be window stickers applied shortly to remind staff to keep them open. But as I say, moving forward, that'll have to be balanced by a suitable working temperature. Otherwise, I think everybody will choose to continue to work at home. So it's going to be a pragmatic approach. But certainly, if there is a need for monitoring, then we will do that. Just as a further point, some of the systems can monitor CO2 anyway, and property are looking at the heating and ventilation systems and the control systems for that. So that's an ongoing strand of work, how we can use a smarter means of monitoring air quality.
Thank you, John.
Chairman, I wonder if we might suggest that perhaps into next year's budget, gentlemen of the ruling group, perhaps you could consider supplying scarves to everybody, so that when we come back into the building, I'm serious, if you've got a big scarf around your back neck, at least you won't be in a draft when you've got a window open. Seriously.
Noted. Thank you, Maureen. There are limits. Okay. Sorry, Chris. No. I meant not scouting scarf. Let's not go there. I think we draw a line now, shall we? John, an awful lot of nice things have been said, not just about you, but the team who works for you. Now, what you didn't know was going to happen, not as the comms team know, because I spoke to Jonathan and some of our members earlier on, is I want the comms team to work with John and do some good news stories on this one, okay? Because they are very modest in what they do. And we need to get rid of that modesty bit and actually say some really nice things about what the comms team do. So can I leave about HR team do. So can I leave it to comms to have Dr. John to work this up as a good news story? Are you all happy with that? I think you would be, like what you've been saying this morning. Sorry? Yeah.
I'm saying the public doesn't know about it.
No, exactly. I hope you're not too embarrassed, John. Thank you. Okay. Right, in that case, we will move to the recommendation, please, on page 77. Is everyone in support? Thank you, show. Thank you. Agenda item 8. County Council workforce availability, etc. It's in front of you on page 85, right at the top there. I formally move it. Recommendations.
Yeah, have a second, Chairman.
Thank you. Page 88. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair.
You had a long rest this time.
I did, yes, thank you. Purpose of this report is to provide members with an update on the current position regarding workforce availability and sickness absence for Q1 of the year 21-22, so to the end of June of this year. Workforce availability, as members may recall, is the way we identify what the impact of COVID has been on people available to work, to inform resource planning and see where, if necessary, we need to move resources around to ensure that statutory services can continue to be delivered. This has fluctuated between 85 and 89% for the majority of the pandemic, but did see a significant dip at the beginning of this month. So although paragraph 2 reports that we've gone from daily to weekly reporting to the corporate leadership team, I must report that as of last week, we've gone back to daily reporting to corporate leadership team. So they've got real-time information about the exact position across all departments. And to demonstrate that, I can tell you that today, workforce availability stood at 88.95%, which has recovered somewhat. And that means across the 4 departments. In adults, that means there was 81.6% of the workforce available, children's 85.14%, chief execs 86.8%, and in place that was up to 90.39%. That fluctuates for reasons of sickness absence, annual leave, any other legitimate reason that people aren't in work. And managers have found it helpful, I think, in seeing where there have been fluctuations. I must say that most Fridays is a dip because that tends to be the day that the majority of people take a day's leave. So it's an identified trend throughout when we've been looking at this and when people have felt able to take leave, which we do encourage actually, so that people have the opportunity to rest and recuperate. Looking at the actual attendance information, interestingly, there's been a slight improvement in terms of attendance overall. So the figure has overall, with COVID included, at Q1 stood at 8.49 days, whereas at the end of Q4 it was 8.68. Interestingly, though, on this occasion, there's been a slight increase in the figure if you add, if you take out of COVID. So at Q1 stands at 7.34 days, and at the end of Q4 it was 7.07, so very close to the stretch target of 7 days. I think this is indicative, actually, that in recent months we've probably seen more of our workforce succumb to COVID than perhaps previously. And that might be due to a range of things like the opening up of society and people being out and about more, and some easing of restrictions. And it's certainly true that within my own team, I think I'd gone through the entire pandemic up until about the last 3 weeks where I'd not had anyone with COVID, and then I've had 3 with COVID in the last fortnight. So just say that to illustrate the point. We have, if we look at table 1 on page 96, which provides the sort of trend data, so the rolling 12-month program. This actually shows that from October 19 through to the end of June 2021, every department shows, albeit in terms of adults, a very modest improvement. But that's interesting to note that over a period of a global pandemic, the overall picture is one of improvement. Other departments are more significant, but even within adults, there is a very 0.01% improvement. We continue to do a range of activities with managers, so the managing of absence and attendance hasn't stopped over the last 18 months. In the quarter referred to here, there's been 2 dismissals under the corporate attendance management procedure, and we've had 26 colleagues left the organisation under ill health retirement, which is got strict criteria to meet for that because it enables the release of pension benefits. We also continue to do what we call hotspot reporting. So if there's a noticeable jump in absence in a particular area, we target that. We put dedicated HR support in with the managers to try and understand and address the reasons for that. And we continue to operate HR surgeries so managers can come along with their casework, and we discuss them and have an action plan so that there is no absences sit unaddressed or unnoticed. Unfortunately, members of our workforce, as other parts of society have experienced, there is a slight impact in people waiting for appointments and treatment on the NHS as they focus their attention. So that is something that some people just can't continue to work whilst they await that treatment. Members of this committee have always been particularly interested in the support that we offer colleagues around the mental health agenda, and we are in the middle of a review of the work of the mental health first aiders to understand the level of contacts, both in terms of quantity and to ensure that there is appropriate support offered to the mental health first aiders, that they're not crossing boundaries, because they are very much about signposting to support and assistance rather than offering any kind of clinical advice. The report also mentions that we're engaging with a local charity called Bipolar Lift, who offer for free support to people who may be experiencing particularly issues with living with bipolar disorder, but also include other mental health issues. We will be doing some proactive work around World Mental Health Day on the 10th of October, and also into the future a little bit in November. We'll be looking at Movember, which is a month dedicated to identifying health issues related particularly to men, and there is a focus on the International Day for Men, which is at the end of November, which is focusing on male suicide, which, as some of you will recognise, is the primary reason for death amongst young men. So we're doing a range of activities around that. Those will be publicised on the intranet news item, and where necessary, we'll add them into the action plan. Members are also interested to have an update on the work done with Midland Engine, being led by Loughborough University. This has had limited success. This is a pro-work study whereby we were working with the university to understand, to collect data and to work with people who had been off sick for a very defined period of time to meet the criteria of the study and see how they could be supported back to work. There's been limited engagement despite several attempts to improve that, and we're talking to the researcher about where we draw a line under that and whether they've got sufficient meaningful data from the engagement that they've had to date. Another area that we have had previous discussions around is the use of other as a reason for absence, and we've tried to get underneath that on a number of occasions with managers. And looking at Appendix B of the report, you will notice that other is the second highest reason for absence in the majority of departments. So we're going to do some further work with managers on that. We're drilling down to find who's using other as an absence reason, because we expanded the number of reasons anyway, so that people couldn't say, I didn't know where to put it, so I put it in other, which is one of the things that we were told. And we'll report back to this committee on the work that we're doing there. It's not as simple, and Sarah will bear this out, as just adding more categories for absence. We need to understand why people are using this one. So I think I'll pause there and see if there's any questions regarding the content of the report.
Thank you, Jill. They've got at least two hands up, and there'll probably be more in a minute. Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. It's specifically on the COVID stats that are in here. The period of this report is entirely before the changes to self-isolation from being pinged. So in your figures for COVID absences, is that people with a positive test, or is that including however many people might have been pinged and were isolating?
No, workforce availability would include people who were pinged and were self-isolating and therefore couldn't work. But the sickness absence figure for the period you're talking about only is about people who've got a diagnosis.
Okay.
But we've also included in that people who had a reaction to vaccination and couldn't work.
Okay, that's helpful. Just to carry on from that, when you mentioned earlier on that there might be a number of people in one department that were off with COVID at the same time, and I know it's very difficult, almost impossible to know where someone has picked up the infection from, but is your feeling that that's because they've been in contact with each other in the work setting, or is this just coincidental? Because I'm just trying to get at whether we're making all the right precautions to stop transmission within the workplace.
I don't think it's about workplace transition. If you take the example I gave you of my team and the 3 I'd had, 2 of those are a couple, so they live in the same house. I'd say that workplace is easier to stop transmission. The issue is about people going out and about, going to bars, going to restaurants, going to outdoor events, football, cricket occasions, all those kind of things. The opening up that I would suggest is where people have been infected.
That's reassuring, Chairman, isn't it?
Thank you, Richard. Jono?
Chairman, thank you very much. It's not just been mentioned by me, it's been mentioned by other colleagues, and we also mentioned it in the last meeting. But I think we do need to seriously look at our return to work policy and maybe have a look at putting a policy forward when it comes to if somebody is sick, that they have to see a manager before they're allowed to go back to work, and speak to that manager and fill in a document that says to that manager that the manager has looked at the issues why they're sick, and if there's anything we can do as a place of work to make sure, if it's stress, we're looking at workload. If it's due to back injury, due to sitting on chairs, we're making sure we're addressing them, but just to have it on file. So if somebody's constantly having so many days off in certain time periods, we can log it and look at why that is. Because not all cases people go sick for the right reasons, but if they are going sick for the right reasons, we need to make sure we're helping them.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. We always approach our employee absence as being genuine, and in the vast majority of cases, it is. In terms of having a return to work policy, return to work discussions is an integral part of our absence management procedure, and sometimes that will be with the manager, sometimes that will be with an HR representative depending on the circumstances, and that will always be informed where the absence has gone over a 4-week period with the engagement and involvement of occupational health, and that will identify whether there's any temporary adjustments, so what we would call a phased return to work, where people either come back on reduced hours that they build up over a period of time, or that might be a change to the physical environment, that might be an adjustment about workload. So all those factors are taken into consideration, and one of the reasons why we have workplace buddies is for some people, if they've been off for any length of time, the actual physical fear of coming back into a building is so great that we buddy them up, they can meet with somebody, have a coffee and just walk into the building together, and we found that quite effective.
Chairman, can I come back on that if possible, please?
Sorry?
Can I come back on that?
Of course you can,
Oh, thank you. And that is documented, so everything is documented and put on file to make sure that it's available maybe to a manager that comes along in a year's time, that information is still available.
The workplace buddy isn't, because that's a matter of personal choice whether somebody wants to. Discussions with occupational health reports are available on file, as are confirmation of reasonable adjustments. We tend to try not to be too rigid in terms of how that's recorded, because different people recover at different times. And if you say, well, you'll be working so many hours this week and so many, we need to have the facility for that to change. And in terms of sharing with future managers, doing a piece of work at the moment called the Employee Passport, which is where information travels around the organisation with the individual, rather than sitting in a particular manager's filing cabinet, virtually or otherwise. And that started off being considered as a disability passport, but we've expanded it to include the entire employee record.
Thank you. Before I come to you, Helen, Marge was poised with pen in hand earlier on, so I assume she wanted to speak. Marge.
No, I didn't. No, I was just poised with pen in hand.
Oh, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Helen.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Jill, thank you again for the work that you do on these reports. It is really, it's really good. You did mention that we do speak a lot about the stress and depression side of things in the committee, and I want to come on to that again, because again, the figures are extremely high on that. And I know you've been doing a lot of work to try and solve the problem, so to speak. But I was just wondering, I don't know if you can say or not, but with these absences, are they recurring absences? So is it the same people multiple times throughout the year, or is it lots of different people? Because I think that's a different way of looking at it if it is. I don't know if we can look at it that way or not, but it was just a thought.
It's both, Councillor Smith, to be honest with you, because some people have a greater propensity to experience stress. Some people are in work situations that are more stressful than others, and some people have very stressful home circumstances. So if it was a recurring theme for an individual, whilst they would be supported to improve, ultimately there would be formal action to take, because whilst we don't doubt the genuine nature of people's absences, ultimately people are contracted to do their jobs, and we need them to be in work to do their jobs. So whilst we'd always seek to be sympathetic, at some point we've got to take a decision whether or not somebody's able to sustain the role that they're employed to do.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on that, I thank you for your answering. But I know you talked about people coming back into work. I know we are trying to encourage people to come back into work anyway, but is there a way that if they could work from home, if it would relieve the stress and they are able to work, could we work with them so that they can work from home rather than them having to physically come back into the building? Is that what we are doing as well?
So again, that very much depends on your role. You can't deliver personal care to somebody from your own house. Not to be flippant about that, but you just physically can't. So whilst hybrid working is available for many of our staff, there's significant proportions where it's not. The Chief Executive has asked every manager to have a conversation with every member of their team to determine what their needs and preferences are. Individual preferences will always be sat alongside, and service priorities will always be the most important thing. So it will depend so much on your role, but if working flexibly or in a hybrid way can alleviate stress and it is suitable for your role, then yes, that would be one of the key.
That conversation between managers and staff should have all taken place by the end of August. I don't know, Jill has in mind to order that to see what actually all happened now. Is that all right? Thank you. Maureen?
Just very briefly, Chairman, we have got one or two new members on this committee, and perhaps at some stage, not to give you another job, Jill, I think you've got enough jobs, but we must have something that's packed away that could be quite easily brought out, and the new members could be given a pack so that they know what's been discussed by this committee, how we've moved it forward. On the stress side, for instance, you know, talking about the buddies and all the rest of it, we talked long and hard about that, and we've been working long and hard with you as the professionals. I think we as members that have been on this committee a long time have been considering stress as the big be-all and end-all, that where we have problems with staffing and how we can resolve those issues. And we're always looking at new ways forward. And perhaps that would help some of the new members to understand where we've been, what we've done, and if they've got anything additional to add to it that will assist what we've already suggested. Just a thought, Chairman.
Thank you, Maureen. Jill, do you want to respond to
Certainly look and see what we can provide. I suppose part of my response to that would be in sharing the employee health and wellbeing action plan. That's one way that new members could see what had already been identified.
Thank you. Right. Oh, sorry. Didn't you hand over? Thank you. Sorry, Errol.
Yeah, I recognise that since this pandemic, we've had a lot of people who are more stressed than ever in the workplace, and it's really good to see that the council is, and Jill and your team, recognising that too and doing work to address that as best you can. What I was thinking as well is that around cultural change is whether or not leadership needs to sort of model the looking after self-care whilst ill as well, so that they can combat this presenteeism that we sometimes have within our.
I'm sure we'll be coming back to this committee very soon and talking about culture change and leadership development, because I think that that's right. We need to have the same flexibility in our leadership styles to manage differently in a new situation, and we're developing some work around that at the moment, which I'm sure we'll be keen to share with you.
Important where there's flexibility, Errol. We used it earlier, we're using it again. And that's got to be the way forward, hasn't it? A lot of things we do over here. Thank you. In that case, I'll move now to the recommendations on page 88. All those in support, please. Thank you. Much appreciated. Thank you. Item number 9. If I can introduce the recommendations, please, on page 116. Jonathan?
Yeah, I'll be second, Chairman.
Thank you. Sarah, you've got to go through this again. I heard it in Pensions Committee, so sorry you have to do it twice. But you understand why this process to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Really just to set the scene for this report, a report was brought in September 2020 to both Pensions Committee and Personnel Committee about the Court of Appeal judgment on the MacLeod case. And following that report, both Pensions Committee and Personnel did agree to both the establishment and the funding of a project manager for the MacLeod project. And this is a follow-on report to seek the establishment of the additional resources that are required to actually deliver the report. So the purpose of the report is to seek approval from Personnel Committee to the establishment of additional temporary resources required within the pension administration team in order to comply with the Court of Appeal MacLeod judgment. Approval to the funding was provided at Pensions Committee on the 29th of July this year. The background to this particular case is detailed within the report, but basically the court has identified unjustified age discrimination in transitional protection arrangements, initially in the judicial and firefighters pension scheme, but these are now extended into the local government pension scheme as well. A previous report presented to Personnel Committee detailed the impact of the MacLeod judgment on both members' benefits, employers within the LGPS and the administration of the fund. And detailed within this report to the committee are the major impact of this additional work on the pensions administration team. So these are things such as reviewing pension processes, collecting additional information from our scheme employers following the change to a career average scheme in April 2014, and then actually undertaking some retrospective calculations on all eligible pensioners that may result in backdated pension adjustments being determined and require putting into payment. The MacLeod underpin protections being determined and applied to eligible members as well. Through the administration team, we did some initial work to identify or estimate how many members' records we felt we would need to revisit. That initial estimate was around 24,000. More detailed work's now been done, and that's actually standing at around 29,000 records. Obviously, there has been media coverage of the McLeod judgment, so we have already started to have contact with members who are asking if they will be affected by this judgment. So a key part of this work, which will be undertaken by the additional resource, is communication out to both employers and members within the scheme. When considering how we would actually resource this particular piece of work, which again comes to us from central government, we considered the workload currently in place within the Pensions Office. And again, there on page 113, I have detailed a number of these projects. So there is the Guaranteed Minimum Pension Reconciliation Project, which members of the Pension Committee will be fully aware of. Also within pensions, we have an extensive transformation programme where we're looking at our digital development and new ways of working. Central government are also looking to implement national pension dashboards, which will mean that individuals are able to see their pension provision across all of the schemes they may have been members of over time, and it's hoped that this will enable members to reconnect with any lost pensions. And also there is a new Pension Scheme Act of 2021, which is giving the pension regulator stronger powers, which again will have some implications for pensions administration. This particular report details the additional resources that we are or have sought funding for, but we are seeking approval to establish, which are detailed on page 114. Initially, we are looking for these to be established for a period of 2 years. There is an annual cost shown in the report of just over £315,000. That is money that will come from the pension fund itself. But these particular posts detailed here cover all the facets of the work that we do need to undertake. Recruitment to the post will be in line with County Council's recruitment and selection process, which we would plan to commence as soon as possible to ensure that resources complete their induction and extensive training programmes prior to the requirement to commence the actual McLeod activities. But obviously earlier in today's meeting we have heard issues around recruitment, so certainly we are considering the way that we would actually run this particular recruitment programme. Experienced staff within the pensions administration team will be eligible to apply for secondments to the project with appropriate backfill arrangements in place. But I think this particular team will also enable us to support any workforce planning for the pensions administration team over time as well. We have considered whether we could absorb the work into the existing workforce, but that just really is not feasible. And again, given that this is a Court of Appeal judgment, we have a statutory requirement to undertake the work. We will also be supported and advised by the scheme actuary, Barnett Waddingham, who obviously have extensive knowledge and understanding of the LGPS regulations. And the recommendations for this report are detailed on page 116. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think most, probably all of you are familiar at least with the McLeod judgment. Now, certainly Councillor Barnett, Father Chris and myself were some time ago through the Fire Authority, and authorities right across the country are feeling the pain now, I'm afraid, because of what happened then, and the cost to them and us is going to be considerable. So it really is something which, just as I said earlier on, it's been brought to us by Sarah on behalf of the Pensions Committee, where it's already been. This is formality to go through us. Say formality, but I hope the recommendations will be approved by everyone here today, those of the committee here today. Any comments, anyone? No, thank you. In that case, we'll go straight to the vote. Thank you.
I think this is actually a really interesting report, regardless of. Sorry.
No, carry on. Go on.
Yes, are you happy?
Well, I'm going to move that for the moment. I'm going to move everyone to support this. Can I just move the next one, Sarah? I know you're so eager and keen to get going with it. Bear with me a moment, Sarah. Bear with me a moment. Item 10, I just want to move the recommendations on page 125. Okay, thank you,
I'll be
Jonathan.
second, Chairman.
Seconding it. Well, Sarah, it's your go now.
Thank you. I'll restart. I think this is a really interesting report for anybody that actually holds a pension, and the potential for anybody to be approached by a scammer. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval from Personnel Committee to the establishment of additional technical regulations officer required to support the delivery of the requirements of the pension regulator's pledge to combat pension scams, the requirements of the Pension Scheme Act 2021 regarding combating pension scams, and our own Nottinghamshire Pension Fund action plan, which is attached in Appendix 1. So this report actually details figures relating to scams that have come from the Financial Conduct Authority and the pension regulator themselves. And you'll see within the report that as at August 2020, this was around £30 million of pension that had been lost to scammers since 2017. Scams are on the increase, and they are becoming more and more sophisticated. And again, during the pandemic, additional warnings were issued to members of pension funds. The regulator provided additional help and guidance to really alert people to the increased potential. The Nottinghamshire Pension Fund has a duty of care to do what it can to support and protect its members. A key thing there is actually educating members of the paramount importance to ensure that they understand some of the potential pitfalls for scams and where they may be approached, such as unsolicited approaches, not being able to call a company back, being forced to make a quick decision, being pressurised, being asked to send documents via courier, etc. At its meeting in July, the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund committed to the pension regulator pledge to combat scams, thereby demonstrating its intent to protect its members. We're going to work through the 3 steps that are required by the regulator, and then we will self-certify to say that we have processes and procedures in place, communication, to really start to educate our members much more on this particular area. Also, the new Pension Scheme Act of 2021 has within it a very specific provision regarding transfer scam prevention. People will probably be aware that you can choose to transfer pensions out to other funds and transfer them in and consolidate them, etc. So there's going to be some very specific provisions within the new Act to look at that activity. And there's going to be more statutory rights on the regulator to actually enforce various action. So to enable the Pension Office to implement these increased due diligence checks and requirements on the fund, and to ensure that the fund's duty of care and obligation to protect its members around scams, there is a detailed action plan that I've attached to the end of the report. But again, we've looked at the resourcing across the Pensions Office, and it stands out that we need some additional technical and regulatory officer support. What we plan to do, therefore, is that our Pension Administration Office will do the estimate for any potential transfers out of the fund, but the Technical and Regulations Officer would then carry out an independent set of due diligence checks. Is the company registered with HMRC? Are there any alerts? How does this particular transfer set up against the new Act? Obviously, we have considered the other options available to us, so do nothing. I don't think that is a viable option, and potentially exposes the Nottinghamshire Fund and its members to undue risk, reputational damage and action by the pension regulator. Again, we've had a look at could we absorb this work into the existing team, and given the additional checks that we'll have to undertake, that isn't feasible. So this report is seeking that approval to establish a further technical and regulations officer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. As I said earlier on, again, this report has been to the Pensions Committee. It's come here. That's the process we need to follow. I think you've all seen the adverts on TV. You've all read the media. I've actually seen firsthand some of the scams. Oh, it's dreadful out there. And Chris is nodding away. You would know a lot about this, Chris, as well. Not directly, of course, Chris. But, yeah, exactly. So, open to you. Okay, you're happy to move it. Thank you very much, Sarah. Now, all those in favour? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah, for bringing reports to us. Item number 10. 11. Sorry, yep. If I can begin with, as it says on here, before I'm reminded, to move the recommendation on page 130, please.
I'll be second, Chairman.
Thank you. And thank you, Marie, for sitting very, very patiently and listening to us for the last 2 hours. It's your turn.
Hello, everyone. I've done a presentation for you, and the report today is about just really giving you an update on the last 6 months for the CSC performance update, and then talking to you a little bit about the priorities that we're looking to do in Q3 and Q4. Let's see if this works. So firstly, performance. Just some figures on there. Hopefully you can see that. If not, I will circulate these afterwards so that you can have a look.
Could you please circulate them anyway, Marie?
Yes, I will do.
Thank you.
So this is just looking at April, August this year compared to last year. We know what happened last year. So the figures are going to be slightly lower. But interestingly, the figures for August were actually 4,000 up on last year. When we had our biggest and most significant year ever. Handy Persons Adaptation Scheme and Blue Badge numbers didn't take as many last year because it wasn't an option for people, or people weren't renewing them. They are now, so we're seeing increases in those two particular areas. Some of you will already know and be aware that we took vaccination inquiries for the NHS on behalf of the NHS. That started in January. So January to August this year, we've done just over 16,000 enquiries on behalf of the NHS. So COVID hasn't really gone away for us yet at the CSC. Waiting times on those was significantly lower than the waiting times for the NHS because they were absolutely flooded with calls. And our resolution rates have been very good. Just taking you through some of the other enquiries, we'd have expected that actually social care would have been higher last year than it is this year, but it's not. So last year it sort of levelled off in terms of the volumes last year versus the year before. This year we're seeing increases in social care enquiries. We haven't yet got under the skin of those, but we plan to understand what types of enquiries we're getting and how they're different to what we were getting last year. But currently we're seeing between 1,500 and 2,500 additional enquiries for adult social care coming through the CSC on a monthly basis. So test and trace, that's another thing that we're currently working on. And these are a graph of the numbers. We started to do test and trace in October last year, which was a spike, then it went down. And then we opened everything up in December and it went back up again, and then it started to go down again. So throughout April and June, we were seeing our lowest numbers ever, taking maybe 4 a day or 18 a day in June. But it really spiked in July when we started to open things up again. So we're taking about 160 a day. Bearing in mind that we're only taking the ones that the National Service can't contact at the moment, that's still quite a significant number. So we've had conversations with the National Service and we're taking only 25% of those currently, and National is doing everything else, whilst we're in negotiations with them about taking on the whole lot. from the National Service. So the CSC will be doing all test and trace for Nottinghamshire. So we're in negotiation, well, say we, Public Health are in negotiations with the national team to understand how that will work and what's required. If we do, we'll be seeing 450 a day, maybe 600 a day. So it's a significant shift for us and something that we're going to need to resource. Okay, so social media. Some of you will be aware we actually respond to all the social media inquiries that come through to our social media sites, either tweets or Facebook messaging or whatever. And we've seen last year we had hundreds and hundreds of them because social media went crazy with COVID. And we're seeing less this year, but still higher than in previous years. So I think people are shifting more onto those platforms and using those as an opportunity to ask questions. And my team are responding to them. But we're keeping an eye on the volumes there to try and understand exactly what's coming through, what kinds of things they're asking us to see how we can maybe get people to self-serve and push them onto the web. A little bit of an update on My Nots app. Over 15,000 downloads of the app now. We've been promoting that and that's the highest number that we've got to. So that's really good. Feedback remains high, so we're still getting around 4.5 out of 5 on our feedback on the App Store and the Google Store. 30% of potholes are now done through the app, which is really good. And we've had 196,000 visits, which is 36,000 higher than we'd had in Q4. So it's continuing to grow. What I'd like to see is that it's My Nots is not just a Nottinghamshire County Council app, but actually it's a Nottinghamshire app to drive activity to it. We're talking to our district colleagues to see what things we could put on there that are district related services so that people could probably report a missed bin, for instance. So we're working closely with districts on that. We've already got the police on there and the ambulance service, but I think we could do more. In terms of what we've been doing in the last 6 months, I'll just give you, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but we've had ongoing recovery work. People are, services are now coming back to fully operational. So the CSC have been taking time out to support them, change processes, make sure that what we put in place during COVID is backed out and something else is put back in. So my technical team and customer operational team have been working closely with services to make that happen. COVID, we picked up the clinically vulnerable again this year, and these are the ones that have actually tested positive and therefore have to isolate but are clinically vulnerable and don't have support. So we've been making contact with those people over the last 6 months or so and got processes in place to support them. In terms of driving self-service, there's been a lot of forms developed. I won't go through them all, but there's a list of the forms that we've developed and put online in the last 6 months. So there's some employment licenses, marriage certificate application forms and the like, so people can self-serve online and do that. The other things that we've been working on, so Highways Accessibility Project, speaking and working with Highways ICT and the digital team to develop forms and work with assistive technology so people can self-serve if they have issues, disabilities and the like. So that's ongoing and underway. Might not be sexiest, but Handy Persons Adaptation Scheme, we've added a unique reference number to the forms that we use when applying to that because it helps us reconcile at the back end when we do the invoicing. So it doesn't sound like a big win, but actually it's got rid of a real manual process to reconcile at the end of that. We've implemented a new complaint system that went live this month. So we've been working on that for the last 6 months. It went live on the 9th. So we're currently ironing out any glitches, but that will give us a more efficient service, better reporting than the old system that we had. currently being tested. Staff are all fully trained, so it's in place and being used now. We continue to work on My Knots app. Two things that are happening now. We're adding a new notification centre, so when we do a push notification out, some people don't actually see it because you swipe it away and then it's gone forever. So we're adding a notification centre to the app so you can see the past notifications and read them at your leisure. That will be live at the end of this month. And there's some additional highways functionality being added. So drains, for instance, reporting a blocked drain will be live this month, and others. So look out for those when you're using the app. What else have we been doing? This is what we're going to be working on. So test and trace is going to be a key piece of work that we're working with. We're seeing cases rising. We're looking at doing local 4 or local 0, as they call it, and that will give us between 500 and 1,000 calls a day. So it's a lot. We're also working with the NHS at the moment and discussing how we can support them with their booster programme, because I think there'll be inquiries similar to the inquiries we took with the original vaccinations. I think there'll be lots of questions around how boosters, which do I have? Are they going to give me the same as I had last time? Those kind of inquiries. So we'll field those, and we're working on that. Recruitment. I had a meeting this morning to talk to Ashfield and Mansfield colleagues and their contact centres. They're having similar issues to us in terms of recruiting staff. So we're going to work together to see if we can do some collaborative work around recruitment in that particular area, because Amazon's a big concern for us there. They're sucking the life out of the area, so we need to get ahead of the game there. And we're going to continue with our My Knots app and developing that. There's some cross-cutting projects that we're involved in, supporting residents' access and early resolution, and also the delivery of the digital strategy. So we're working closely with other teams on some cross-cutting projects. There's some additional functionality that we want to put in over the next 6 months with SMS. So using SMS to keep in contact with people. We've used it with test and trace. It works. We want to use it to send out voicemails to people to say, remember to, don't forget to, reminders of appointments, etc. And we also want to do some surveys through text. So we're looking at how that will work and doing some scoping of that over the next 6 months or so. Extending the use of Teams and making sure that we maximise the functionality there across our team. We're doing some work on the online support hub, so the volunteer hub that was used extensively during COVID. How does that work, and how will that work going forward to support residents and continue to support residents when they need help and advice? The complaint system, we need to bed it in, but we also need to think about what else it needs and how we develop it and continue to develop it. And then the council plan, which will be coming out in the autumn. I'm sure there'll be work that we'll need to support and help with at the CSC. So those are the kind of things that I think that we're looking at doing over the next 6 months to deliver and support not only the residents but internal departments as well. I try to keep it to 10 minutes so that we can get out on time, but that's me. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm just exhausted looking at the list of things you do. Terrifying, really. Yeah, I've got a meeting as well at 4, so I'll ask Jonathan in his case to step in the chair for Wood. Before I do that, though, I'll be with you as soon as I can, Chris. Jonathan and I had the greatest pleasure of joining you and your team online a couple of months ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was wonderful to be able to talk to your team. We'd love to have done so at your workplace, but that obviously isn't possible, wasn't and isn't possible yet. But what I'd like to do is set up a second one of those with you and some of the team to actually flesh out some of what you've got on the screen today, Marie, if that's okay. If we can ask you to try and arrange that later, Jonathan, if you wouldn't mind. With obviously with you, Jill. But I think that's very important because you've given us a whistle-stop tour today through all this, but we need to get behind all of this as well. I already embarrassed John earlier. I'm going to embarrass you now. It's 2 of you going to get embarrassed today. I've already had conversations with our comms team, Jen, seeing Jen next week on something else. But you're aware of this, Jill. We want to work with you guys to achieve good news stories. We are not good at telling people out there how good we are, and we must do more of that. We could start with John. That was what we told the comms team this afternoon. Adam and our comms team is listening in on YouTube this afternoon, so he'll be aware of this. He'll pick it up with Jen, and already Jill is aware of this conversation anyway. So we need to do more. Sorry, I'm being called. I'll be there. Jonathan, if you mind sitting in that case. Sorry, I do have to go. Sorry, Mary. I hope I'm not being rude, but I did say earlier on I've got to go at 4 o'clock. I'm really being told off anyway. So thank you very much. And Jonathan, would you mind stepping in? Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Again, speak soon.
Okay, thanks everyone. Let's just open up to the floor now for any comments on Marie's presentation.
I just want
Councillor
to say
Dobson.
well done to Maria and the team. As usual, I like the fact that you're going to expand on the WhatsApp and to get into the districts, get them involved as well. That would be really useful, especially it would be useful for all of us because people can actually go online and see what they can get and what they can't get and who's going to help them and all the rest of it without constantly, I mean, I'm elected to do that. And that I don't have a problem with. But sometimes it would help if they could actually use their phones and go on the app and have a look. And I'm able to say, go on the WhatsApp and you'll find where to go. They're getting there slowly. But thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Councillor Dobson. Councillor Henry.
Yes, thank you. I just want to echo that as well, Maria. Excellent. Especially throughout the pandemic, your team has been working very, very hard. And I know that because I've had the privilege to call them at times. I didn't have to wait very long on the phone. I think 26 seconds is probably longer than what I had to wait. So it's been very good. So you can pass on our thanks, really, to the team for the work. One other thing I was going to point out is that I know the app is there, but we have to recognize that quite a few of my residents, anyway, cannot access the app. They don't know how to do that. So it's about what else there is to attract those people or to inform those people that cannot use the app about the services that we have. So I presume the bits around the comms strategy that I know your chairman before you left talked about maybe one way of addressing that so people know where to go. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. I think absolutely about communication. The app is a very important part, but we have to be absolutely clear to make sure that we are not disenfranchising any residents. I think, if we're honest, the vast majority of our residents know how to use a phone or have a smartphone now. I'm not saying everyone does, but the ones who do have a smartphone, we don't know about the app. As you say, it's about the communication strategy. So just give more work to the comms team over there, as I've shown there, to work on that, how that goes out, to see how we can get more people to download that app, because as I say, it's a very good app for the ones. I think as a council, most people know when you go around doing pothole patrols, as one of our former colleagues used to call it, go around there, it's much easier than carrying your laptop around with you, walking around the street and looking odd when you're doing it. But some look odd anyway when we go around the streets. But there we go. So any other members wish to raise any points? I think really once again, I just want to again echo the comments made to really thank yourself and your team. I know we all said we should keep saying you did a great job. Speaking to again your team when we were on that call, was great to see the enthusiasm everyone has about customer service, and that's the key thing about customer service. You have to be enthused about it. You can tell how many of us have rang up someone and you can just tell the other person, but they don't give a damn with what they're saying there. But you don't get that with your team. We absolutely, to the members who rang up there and what I saw from that call. So thank you very much. Very much appreciated. So that's the recommendation that was already proposed, that members consider the proposed priorities and agreed development and work plans. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Thank you very much. On to the final item, we're pleased to hear, and I'll do the recommendation first so I don't get told off, but that's that the committee considers whether any amendments are required to the work programme. Marge, are you?
I'm afraid, yeah, sorry, Chair. Yeah, Marge has had to leave. So,
okay.
Just say the work programme will be updated, along with the recommendations in some of the previous reports. And really, it's up to members. Got any more comments on what's before them? Thank you.
Great, thank you. So you see in the next meeting, I already said about the apprenticeship strategy. We've got the graduate development programme there. Review of communications functions, which again we've talked on today. Next thing's absence, and the agenda for the 15th December will also be populated by the items that come forwards there. But again, anytime anyone's got anything they want to bring forward, can do so now, or contact the chairman or myself, and happy to look to incorporate that. So any questions or comments on the work programme? Great, thank you. So thank you everyone for your time. It's been a long meeting. Thank you very much for your time and attendance. Unfortunately, some people went early, but we won't hold that against them. Maybe not, or maybe we will. But thank you very much, everyone. Have a safe journey home. Thank you.